Picture this: a 19-year-old boy, alone, in the middle of the Utah desert, one of the most remote, unforgiving stretches of land in the entire United States. No neighbors for miles, no traffic, no witnesses, just flat earth, dry heat, and a sky so wide it swallows you whole. He's not lost. He's not on vacation. He's not passing through. This is his land, his dream, his future. He worked for this, saved for this, planned for this since he was old enough to understand what hard work meant. And on the night of May 27th, 2022, a Friday, he worked late into the evening, planting his very first crop. The rain was coming. He wanted to get it done. He called his grandmother the next morning, told her everything was okay. That was the last time anyone ever heard Dylan Round's voice. By Monday, his family couldn't reach him. By the time they drove out to that farm in Lucin, Utah, his camper was there, his truck was there, his tools were there. But Dylan's boots were sitting behind a dirt pile near his camper, and one of those boots had blood on it. Dylan's blood, and someone else's DNA. Dylan Rounds was gone, and out there in that silent desert, something had happened. Something violent. Something that a 60-year-old man squatting on a neighboring property did not want anyone to find out about. This is the story of a boy who only wanted to farm his land, who trusted the wrong person, who paid for that trust with his life, and whose family waited 23 months before they finally got to bring him home. Before we go any further, I need you to understand who Dylan Rounds was, because this story is not just about what happened to him, it's about who he was before it happened. Dylan was born on August 1st, 2002, in Idaho, the oldest of 3 children. He grew up in a farming family, and from a very young age, farming wasn't just something he did. It was something he was. While other kids his age were figuring out what they wanted to be when they grew up, Dylan already knew. He didn't just want a job. He didn't want a salary, a desk, or a career path someone else laid out for him. He wanted land. He wanted soil in his hands. He wanted to build something from nothing, something that was entirely, completely his. In 2019, when Dylan was just 16 years old, he and his grandfather partnered on a piece of land in Lucin, Utah. A small, remote town right on the Utah-Nevada border, barely a dot on the map. Population, almost 0. Surrounded by nothing but desert, silence, and open sky. For most teenagers, that would sound like a punishment. For Dylan, it sounded like everything. He spent 2 full summers preparing that land. Clearing it, working it, getting it ready for the day he could actually plant something. He lived in a camper on the property. He had no running water. He didn't complain. He drove back to his parents' house when he needed to shower, stayed for a meal, and went right back out. His mother, Candace Cooley, described him simply: no drama, no hesitation. She said Dylan would never walk away from that farm, ever. Think about that statement. She wasn't just expressing grief. She was telling investigators something critical. She knew her son. She knew what that farm meant to him. The idea of Dylan just walking away was not a theory. It was an impossibility. By spring of 2022, 3 years of preparation had finally paid off. Dylan was 19 years old. The land was ready. The equipment was in place. The seed was purchased. And on the night of Friday, May 27th, he worked late into the dark, planting his very first crop before the rain came in. He was exhausted. He was probably proud. He called his grandmother the following morning from the farm. He sounded fine. He sounded like Dylan. Nobody knew it would be the last time. May 28th, 2022, a Saturday. Dylan Rounds spoke to his grandmother by phone from his farm in Lucin, Utah. That call is the last confirmed contact anyone had with him. After that silence, Dylan's family didn't panic immediately. He was a young man living independently on a remote farm. He wasn't the type to check in every hour. But by Monday, Memorial Day, something felt wrong. He wasn't answering his phone. He wasn't responding to messages. His mother, Candace, made the drive out to Lucin. What she found when she got there stopped her cold. Dylan's camper was on the property. His personal belongings were inside. His vehicle was there. Everything that mattered to Dylan, everything he had worked for, was sitting exactly where it should be. Except Dylan. And then, investigators found the boots. Behind a mound of dirt near his camper, Dylan's boots, sitting there, alone, in the desert. His parents told police something that should have immediately escalated this case. Dylan only ever owned one pair of boots at a time. He wore them until they fell apart, then bought the exact same pair again. Those boots were not a spare. They were not left behind casually. As Candice put it, a kid doesn't go walking in the desert without his boots. She was right, and she was terrified. When investigators examined those boots more closely, what they found confirmed everything the family feared. One boot had a blood stain. DNA analysis revealed that blood belonged to Dylan Rounds. But that wasn't all. Mixed into that same sample was a second DNA profile, someone else's. The desert had a secret, and that secret had a name. It would just take investigators a while to say it out loud. In the early days of the investigation, Dylan's family felt desperately alone. They drove out to the farm themselves. They organized their own searches. Candice told Dateline, "They left us out there with no assistance, no help, no guidance." She described calling the sheriff's office and getting no answer. They would never answer their phone. For a family already living their worst nightmare, that silence from law enforcement was its own kind of cruelty. But while family and volunteers were searching the land, investigators were quietly zeroing in on someone who had been right there the whole time, living just a few miles away from Dylan's farm. Someone Dylan had actually trusted. His name was James Brenner. He was 58 years old, and he had been squatting, living illegally on a remote property neighboring Dylan's farm. At one point, Brenner had actually lived on Dylan's property, helped him bale hay. Dylan's mother said she didn't know Brenner well, but she had no reason for alarm. That trust, that ordinary, human, completely reasonable trust, may have cost Dylan his life. Before we go any further, I need to stop for a second and talk to you directly. If you're watching this right now, it means you care. It means you're the kind of person who believes that stories like Dylan's deserve to be heard, not forgotten, not buried in a news cycle, not reduced to a headline. This channel, The Cold Case Signals, exists for exactly that reason, to make sure these voices don't go quiet. If this story is hitting you the way it's hitting me, please hit that subscribe button right now. Leave a comment below telling me what you think, what you feel, what this case means to you. Share this video with one person who needs to hear Dylan's story, because awareness kept this case alive. Community kept this family fighting. And channels like this one exist to make sure that never stops. Now, let's get back to James Brenner, because what investigators found next was the kind of evidence that makes your stomach drop. While Dylan's family was still searching that desert with their own hands, law enforcement was quietly building something. Dylan's cell phone records became one of the first major breaks. After he disappeared, his phone showed movement. The signal tracked directly to the area near James Brenner's trailer, not near the road, not near town. Right there in the shadow of the man who would eventually confess to killing him. Then came the search of Brenner's trailer. On June 16, 2022, the Box Elder County Sheriff's Office and the FBI executed a search of Brenner's property. What they found inside gave them probable cause to arrest him immediately, not for murder yet, but for weapons violations. Brenner was a convicted felon. He had no legal right to possess firearms. Inside that trailer, investigators found black powder ammunition, ignition caps, speed loads, all related to muzzle-loading weapons. They arrested him on firearms charges. But what they didn't know yet was what else was hiding in that evidence. Because here is where the case turns from disturbing to chilling. During the investigation, authorities recovered a time-lapse video, a recording that Brenner himself had made, likely not understanding what it would eventually reveal. The timestamp placed it right around the time of Dylan's disappearance. In that video, James Brenner is cleaning a gun, and on his arms and on his shirt there are blood stains. That shirt was seized, tested, and it came back positive for Dylan Rounds' DNA. Let that settle for a moment. A time-lapse video, blood on a shirt, the victim's DNA, all of it captured accidentally by the man who did it. Before his arrest on weapons charges, Brenner had also done something else that investigators found deeply telling. He went to a neighbor, a friend, and handed over 3 black powder guns. Asked the neighbor to keep them safe. When the neighbor asked why, Brenner said he needed to do it for his own safety. Said the last time he had trouble with the law, they took everything from him. He was already preparing, already trying to cover his tracks. In October 2022, 5 months after Dylan vanished, Box Elder County officially reclassified the case as a homicide investigation. In March 2023, nearly a year after Dylan disappeared, James Brenner was formally charged with criminal homicide, aggravated murder, and abuse or desecration of a human body. Dylan's family had known it all along. They had said it from day one. Their son did not walk away from his farm. Their son did not abandon his dream. Their son was taken from them by a man he had no real reason to fear. For nearly 2 years, Dylan Rounds existed in the worst possible space a family can be forced to occupy. The space between knowing and not knowing, between grief and hope, between burying your child and still searching for him. 23 months. That's how long Candice Cooley waited to know where her son was. In April 2024, as part of a plea agreement, James Brenner did something he had refused to do for almost 2 years. He led authorities to Dylan's body. On April 9th, 2024, law enforcement and FBI agents recovered skeletal remains in a remote area on the Utah-Nevada border, not far from the farm Dylan had spent years building. He had been buried out there in the desert, hidden in the land he loved. Dozens of volunteers had spent hours searching that terrain with high-tech equipment. When the remains were confirmed to be Dylan's, his mother released a statement that carried the weight of every single one of those 23 months. She said, "We are grateful we now have Dylan's body and can bring him home as we continue our fight for justice." Continue our fight. Even in that moment, even after finding her son's remains, Candice was not done fighting, and she had every reason not to be. Because when James Brenner pleaded guilty, the charge was second-degree felony murder, and the sentence he received, 3 to 30 years in prison. Candice Cooley stood up in that courtroom and said what every single person watching this video is probably thinking right now. She said only 1 to 15 years is for murdering Dylan. The rest is gun charges. So constituents of Utah, think about it and who you vote for. These laws are made by our legislature, and if you want them changed, this could be your kid. And it could be a man serving more time for having the guns than for murdering your child with them. She's not wrong. Brenner was sentenced on July 1st, 2024. More than 24 family members filled that courtroom. They had waited 2 years for this moment. They waited to see his face, to see if there was any remorse behind his eyes. He never turned around, never looked at a single one of them, never said a word. The judge, acknowledging his complete lack of empathy, advised the parole board to keep Brenner incarcerated for as long as legally possible. Dylan Rounds was finally home, but justice, real justice, still felt like something just out of reach. Dylan Rounds was 19 years old. He had a dream so pure, so simple, so honest, that it's almost impossible to process what happened to him. He didn't want fame. He didn't want to go viral. He wanted soil and seeds and rain and a harvest. He wanted to build something with his own hands, and he almost did. His mother, Candice, has turned the worst thing that ever happened to her into something meaningful. She launched a non-profit called Dylan's Legacy, an organization dedicated to supporting families of missing persons, families just like hers. Families who know what it is to search without help, to wait without answers, to grieve without closure. If you want to support Dylan's Legacy, I'll put the link in the description below. Because the least we can do, all of us who heard Dylan's story tonight, is make sure his name keeps moving forward. And to Dylan, if stories carry any weight beyond the world we can see, I hope somewhere, somehow, you know that people are still saying your name, that you are not forgotten, that your farm, and your boots, and your first crop, and your grandmother's phone call, none of it has disappeared. Not really. You were here, and we remember. This has been the Cold Case Signals. If this story moved you, and I believe it did, please subscribe right now. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a signal. Drop a comment below. Tell me what you felt. Tell me what you think justice should have looked like for Dylan. Share this video because every share is one more person who hears his name. We have more cases coming. More signals to follow. More stories that deserve to be told the right way. With depth, with truth, and with respect for every single person whose life became a headline. I'll see you on the next one.